This is something that's going to really save you when you're conjugating verbs, because it comes up every time you find a verb that has this letter at the end of its verb stem. This is bi-eup. And in this video, I'm not only going to cover how to conjugate these sorts of verbs. No, that would be too simple. I'm also going to show you one of the reasons why they conjugate this way in the first place to help it make more sense logically. We're gonna take a regular verb for an example. Let's look at the verb 맵다, which means to be spicy. Now, normally when you're conjugating a verb, for example, when you make the regular 요 form, you're going to start by getting the verb stem. Now, the verb stem is simply the verb unconjugated like this with the ta removed. So we're left with 맵. Now, for regular verbs, so not this kind of verb, but for other verbs, all you're going to do is attach something to the very end. And what you attach will depend on the final vowel. So here, the final vowel is 에. Again, for a regular verb, if that vowel is one of these, 아 or 오, then what you're going to attach is 아요. And if the last vowel is not one of these, well, then you're going to attach 어요. For an example that's not one of these, let's just take the verb 작다, to be small. The verb stem is 작, which ends with this vowel, 아, which is one of these, so we're gonna make it 작아요. Or let's take another example. 먹다, to eat. Well, the stem is 먹. It doesn't end with one of these vowels, so we get 먹어요. Now, there are exceptions, of course, like anything, and if you'd like to learn it in more detail, I will link a video in the description box below where you can learn about all of these conjugation rules. So here in this verb, 맵다, the final vowel is just 에, which is not 아 or 오. So if this was a regular verb, you would attach 어요 to the end and you would get 매버요, but it's not a regular verb, so that's not what happens. Most verbs, but not all verbs, that have verb stems ending with this letter, bi-eup, are irregular. And that means you simply can't follow the regular rules that you would with other verbs. There's something else that you're going to have to do first. Fortunately, this is not difficult at all. So what do you do when you see this letter? Well, the first thing you're going to do, most of the time, is remove it. We get our verb stem, 맵, we remove it, we're left with 매. The next thing you're going to do is attach the syllable 우, 매우. And then finally, you'll just finish the conjugation as normal. So you look at this vowel, well, it's not 아 or 오, so you're going to attach 어요. This is actually not only in this sort of conjugation, but in other verb conjugations as well. We can shorten this. Again, you can learn about that in the video in the description, but you can just shorten this to 매워요. You'll notice that they'll end with this most of the time. One more quick example. 덥다, to be hot, like hot weather. Well, you get the stem, you remove the bi-eup, and you're left with 더, 우, 어요, 더워요. A couple exceptions, though, are these two verbs, which end with the 없다 sound, so 곱다 and 덥다. For these verbs, you're going to remove the bi-eup just like before, but instead of attaching 우, you're actually going to attach 오. 곱다, well, we remove it, we get 고, and then we get 오 again, and then this vowel is 오, so we're going to attach 아요, so we're left with 고아요. And the same goes with 덥다. 도, 와, 요. Other verbs that end with this 없다 sound, specifically verbs that end with 롭다, will conjugate as usual. 외롭다, to be lonely, that one just conjugates normally as 외로워요. And there are many other verbs that also end with this as well that do the same. And there are also many exceptions to this that don't have to do any of that. All you do is you attach 아요 or 어요 as usual, as if they were just regular verbs. I'm going to write down the most common ones that you'll see. Sorry, this is a lot, but these are all really common. 잡다, for to grab. This one, you don't have to remove it. All it does is becomes 잡. The vowel is 아, so we attach 잡아요. 접다, for to fold. You get 접어요. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but they work just like regular verbs. 씹다, for to chew. 짚다, for to grab, like picking up. 입다, for to wear. 엎다, for like putting over your shoulders. 뽑다, for picking or choosing. 넓다, for wide. 밟다 for stepping on something, and 수줍다 to be shy or bashful. So now you can conjugate these, but in order to understand why this happens, we need to look at another letter. It's a bi-eup with this thing on the bottom, the circle. Now, there aren't actually many resources you can find about this letter, but this letter is known as the 순경음 bi-eup, or also known as the soft bi-eup. And until the 1500s, there were two bi-eups. There was actually a couple others. There was this one, bi-eup, and then there was this one, the soft bi-eup. So in your mind, you might be thinking, okay, well, that's kind of like a B or a P. It was even softer. It wasn't a regular bi-eup, but it was more in your throat. And this letter went extinct, actually, as pronunciation changed, and also as words that used this letter became replaced with other letters. You all know the name Seoul, for the city of Seoul, as we say. Well, the city of Seoul actually is from a word that was written like this. How would you read that? Again, this isn't 서울, because I said it's a soft one. 서울, 서울. It's more of a softer sound that's in your throat. And in fact, I'm sure I'm not saying this correctly, but no one can call me out because everyone that was using it in the 1500s is now most likely deceased. And in fact, it was so soft that as language evolved, this letter became replaced with just a W sound. So specifically, I shouldn't just say W because there is no W letter. Words that used this letter became replaced with either the vowel O or U. So that's how you get this becoming 서울. And since this letter was so soft anyway, it just made sense to replace it with more of a W sound instead of saying 서울. Kind of sounds like a W anyway. And this is interesting. From what I could find searching Naver Dictionary, all of those conjugation exceptions that I gave you, so 잡다, 덮다, 씹다, 입다, all of those, were originally not written using this letter. They were written using this letter, just the regular bi-eup. So their sound was stronger originally. And this is possibly the main reason why those verbs today are exceptions and they're still conjugated regularly and not irregularly like all of the other ones which were originally written using this letter. Let's go back to our example with 맵다. Back in the 1400s, this was not 맵다. However, it was written like this. And this also used that letter, the soft bi-eup. Now, when this letter was replaced, we were just left with a W sound, as I said. So what we get is the stem, me, like before, but now with a W sound. Now, look at this vowel then. So let's go back to our fundamentals of conjugation. This vowel is not an A or a O, is it? No. So what do we attach to the end of it? We would just attach oyo, right? Do you see what I see? So verbs that were originally written with this other soft bi-eup ended up changing into a W sound, and that leaves us today with various conjugations. So you get 매워요, or as today we would just write it and say it as 매워요. But you might not be satisfied. You might think, wait, Billy, but there are more verbs. Does this work with the other ones? Let's do another example with 돕다. So 돕다 means to help. Well, we get the stem, 돕, we remove it, and you get 도와요. This one was also originally this soft bi-eup, but now we get a 도우, W sound. What vowel is this? O. So what do we attach to the end of this? 아요, and we have that W sound, so we're left with this, 도와요. So notice that if a verb was written with this letter, the soft bi-eup, then it's going to either add an ayo or an oyo as usual, just depending on the vowel that comes before it, just like any standard verb. In fact, what's interesting is that in some dialects, such as Gyeongsang dialect, you would be familiar with Busan dialect, you might still hear some words pronounced with this soft bi-eup in them. Somehow, the soft bi-eup returned. I used to live in Busan as well, and I would hear these sorts of expressions from time to time, and I didn't know that it came from this letter at all. But one way you could say 춥다, so something's cold. Well, normally you would conjugate that as 추워요, or something's 덥다, like it's hot. 더워요, like you feel hot. Remember I said this used to be written with these letters. So how would we conjugate it if this letter was still alive? For 춥다, we'd get 추워요. 요, right? Because it ends with this vowel. And 덥다, we'd get 더워요. Yeah, except that the yo ending, that's more for speaking a little more politely. Let's use this ending, 라. So instead of saying 추워라, like, it's so cold, 더워라, oh man, it's hot. 춥어라. This is not written this way anymore. Like I said, this letter is completely extinct, but you could write it as 춥어라 and 더워라. 춥어라, 더워라. Two more examples are the verbs 곱다 and 굽다, which, as we learned, 곱다 would become 고와요, and 굽다, this would become 구워요. But if this vowel was still around, we would conjugate it like this. Well, we have this o, so we're going to attach a, and then for this one as well, 굽. Well, this one doesn't end in o or a, so we're going to attach o. And let's do a command ending this time, 라. So a little different. So we're left with 고바 and 굽어라. Nowadays, though, this actually is often pronounced as 굽어라. So you could tell your friend, 고기 굽어라, like cook the meat for me. So did I miss any exceptions? Anything else you'd like to know about this old letter or about conjugating verbs that have this letter in it? Let me know in the comments below. I do read all of those. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in another episode. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.